Hi, everyone. This is Debi Ghate with the Philanthropy Roundtable, and we are back for another edition of Can We Talk About It? Today, I am really delighted to have someone who works very hard in philanthropy to bring resources to communities and to really do a lot of work to make sure that we are supporting the people in our communities who need help. So Carrie Tynan is the executive director of the Adolph Coors Foundation, and she is here today to talk about her work and to talk about issues related to the foundation world. So, hi, Carrie. Thank you for being here.
Debbie, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege and honor to be on with you today.
Thanks, Carrie. I'm really glad that you're here because it's not often that we get to talk to people who are actually working at foundations and who care about the kinds of issues that we're talking about on this podcast. So I welcome you. Carrie, first, what does it mean to be an executive director at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I contemplated this one a little bit as being an executive director of the foundation. I have my hands in everything from working on our investments to overseeing all of our programs and any grants that are going out. I'm in close contact with our board pretty regularly. And I work very closely with many nonprofits, including Philanthropy Roundtable.
And we are so lucky to work with you. One of the things that is interesting about Adolph Coors Foundation is it sounds like it's named after a particular person. So are you a member of the family that is related to Adolph Coors?
Yeah, great question. So yes, I am fifth generation family member. I'm the first family member as the executive director at the Adolph Coors Foundation. So the foundation was started by my grandfather and my great uncle over 40 years ago. They started that foundation with some money that came after their brother was kidnapped and killed. And those assets have been growing for the last 40 plus years at the foundation. That's what we're able to give away. We have a complete 8-member family board. So we have no community members on our board. So it is very heavy family here.
Wow. Yet you're the first family member to actually be the executive director. So who were the people who held that position before? Were they were professionals that the family brought on to do this?
Yeah, so when the foundation started, a lot of the grant making came over from the company. Specifically here, our Colorado-specific grant making, our national grant making came with Joe Coors and his passion for the national policy landscape. And so a couple of the staff members came with them from the company, but has evolved over time to dedicated community members. Sally Rippey was here as I first came on almost 14 years ago, and then John Jackson for the 10 years prior to my last 2 years here.
Wow. So you've been there for 14 years, and then you stepped into the executive director role when? That was more recent.
Just 2 years ago. So I got to know Colorado very well, all our grant making here and our direct human service giving, and then really took a deep dive in our national public policy giving and to really know those two spaces. And now I get to oversee all of it.
Here's maybe a tricky, sensitive question, but what's it like to work with so much family?
It is a great, tricky question. I will tell you, I call my chairman Pete in the meetings and Dad outside of the meetings. And we are lucky that we have other family businesses that the families used to working together in a lot of different capacities. And that's the beauty of it, is that we know how to say no to each other. We know how to support each other. And I can call them anytime, day or night, because they tend to answer my phone calls. So I will tell you, the value of working for the family is that we know how to work through issues, and we all love each other when we leave the board meeting at the end of the day.
Wow. I wish I could say the same with my family. I can't even project what that would be like. That's incredible. And being able to work side by side and then have dinner together at the end of the day, that is pretty incredible. So I'm curious about the story behind your family getting into philanthropy. You gave us a sense of the connection with your original point was, but how does your family feel about philanthropy, and what has the history been there?
Yeah, I think while the foundation is not connected to the company in any way, the family made their money because of the work that they do. And what was so important here in Colorado is that we give back to the community that has been so good to us. So many people, this goes back decades, here in Colorado specifically, as the company started, was so good to the family and so good to the business. And those are the people that we want to take care of. So many of those people in Golden are the employees, and so many people in our community have some connection to the family or to the company one way or another. And it's just spread now across the country. And so really the goal is to give back to those who are so good to us. And it's also to help people help themselves. We truly believe in a hand up and not a hand out. And we want people to do better for themselves. We want people to value work as we all do. It's really important to the family that we protect our freedoms and our rights.
Well, that is very important work. It is very important work. And it's a way to take what the family generated through its business and be connected with the community and strengthen the community, which then also makes the entire country more prosperous. I mean, this is actually how it works. I'm curious. I sometimes hear the question, well, how hard can it be to give money away? So you sit in the seat of executive director of a foundation, the entire purpose of which is to make grants. So how hard is it to give money away?
Yeah. If anyone watching this were to go and read my bio, it would say the foundation would have no money left if I was in charge of giving it all away. So luckily I have a board to give me and my staff the guardrails that I need to do this. But really when we look at it from a lens of donor intent. Bill and Joe Coors started this foundation. We have to make sure we're honoring their legacy. So giving away money isn't easy because you never have enough money to give away. There's really not many organizations that are doing bad things out there. So many are just trying to help people and help kids and make our society, our community better. So that piece of it is hard. Fortunately for our foundation, we have this thing called donor intent, and that donor intent gives us the guardrails to know what areas that we can give in. I will still tell you, even with guardrails, it's really, really difficult. There's so many great organizations out there that are doing amazing work that you try and find a loophole every chance you can. But I have a board to keep me and my staff on point so that we make sure that we're giving to organizations that are really what our donors wanted us to do.
Yeah, that it is good to have that guardrail, I imagine, and then to have that board help interpret that and make sure things are keeping on track. So who are the beneficiaries of all of this? Who do you guys help?
Yep, that's great. So here in Colorado, we kind of have the youth bucket where we're looking at one-to-one mentoring, financial literacy, after-school tutoring, character and leadership development, anything to help these kiddos be prepared to enter the workforce or enter our community in a productive manner. And then from the adult perspective, we're really looking at work first programs, workforce development, apprentice programs, anything to get people back to work and off government assistance so they can be those contributing members of society and really be role models for the future generations that will come behind them.
That's incredibly important work. And it also means it really truly reflects what you described as being the reason your family is so invested in and committed to philanthropy, about really making sure the community around them is taken care of. So I love that. I love hearing that. It has COVID been a particular challenge, and has the foundation had a chance to respond to COVID related issues?
I think that's a great question. I always giggle that our foundation isn't the most nimble. We meet 3 times a year, and our board has they've always been very thoughtful, and they'll say, Carrie, just take a deep breath. When COVID hit, I was like, we need to do something immediately. And they said, no, take a deep breath. And let's see how that works. And I will tell you, it was a great lesson for me to learn. Sometimes the ability to move instantly is great, but at this point, it gave us a chance to really check out the landscape and see what was needed, see which leaders were ready to move or who pivoted in a way that was valuable to the individuals that they were serving. So the board did some COVID specific grant making, and it was totally unsolicited, which was actually fun to call nonprofits and say that they had received an unsolicited grant that they didn't expect. But it was just completely board driven. Staff did some research and gave them the list of grantees that we have, but they got to drive the grant making in that space. And But I will tell you, Debbie, the thing I've learned the most through COVID and our nonprofit leaders is the great leaders have figured out how to navigate the waters when times get tough. They know how to figure out how to open their doors so that they can serve youth, or we had a Boys and Girls Club here, offered childcare for healthcare workers. So they pivoted completely while they couldn't have their normal population there. They helped the community. And it's just beautiful to see how many of these nonprofit leaders have just elevated and shown why they are in the positions that they are.
And it's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story, Carrie, because it's amazing how a lot of organizations are preparing for these moments. And when the moments arrive, they actually put all of their resources into action. So it is incredible. It is incredible to watch. And philanthropy is a huge part of why that's possible. So thank you for everything that you're doing to be part of that story. I don't know what would have happened in the country if we weren't ready from a philanthropic perspective, and if the organizations weren't ready either. So it's incredible. Now, this all sounds so good. Right? It all sounds so positive. It all sounds like it's such a win-win situation, and that there are only incredible things that can happen if we work together, right? But the fact is, there are critics. There are critics out there of philanthropy. There are critics out there of family foundations. There are critics out there of all kinds of things. And I want to ask you about some of that, because I think the critics are loud and they're very vocal, and it is hard for people who are at the receiving end sometimes to be able to have a chance to express their point of view. So I would like to give you that chance to do that. So one of the criticisms is that I think there's a myth being spun that people who are family members who are working at family foundations, that there's something, untoward about this. There's something about not doing, the same amount of work that an employee would do. And just the idea that your services for this foundation somehow is less value because you're a family member compared to the value of an employee who's not a family member. And there's these, pictures being painted of family members running off and, taking vacations in Bermuda or whatever. That actually came up in a conversation I heard the other day. So I'm curious, Carrie, as somebody who happens to be in this position, you are a family member. After 14 years, you are now the executive director there. What do you think when you hear these criticisms?
Debbie, this hits really close to home for me, and probably the majority of the family. Is we've always talked about how hard we have to work to gain a position. So our family has made it very clear that nothing is handed to you, that you have to work for the position. We all had to work outside of the family for at least 2 years before we came to work for the family. So we knew what it was like to work for somebody other than our father or our uncle or our brother or sister or cousin. And every family member has their stories about how much harder they had to work to get the promotion at the company or get the promotion at their job, because they didn't want it to appear they were getting it only because of their last name or who they knew. And I would say the same thing goes for me at the foundation. I feel like I have to prove myself twice as hard. I have to make sure I'm dotting my I's and crossing my T's, because I would never want that to come into question. I have too much pride in my work. I want to make sure that I'm doing good for the communities that we're serving. I want to make sure I'm doing good for our country and for our board. And this is a really important piece, because I work equally as hard. It's not that I clock in every day, but it feels like that. I'm here. I work my 8 hours. Being in the office with my staff is important. And so I play a very active role as a family member to prove that I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And I'm sure there are plenty of nonprofits where it doesn't, or plenty of foundations where it doesn't look the same. But it's something that's been instilled in us. That's probably the legacy and the family that I come from, is that it's been instilled in me that you work hard and it's merit-based, I will tell you. Either you work hard and you get paid for it, or you don't. There's no, just because you have a name, you get a paycheck.
Yeah. Well, thank you for setting the record straight, at least in the case of your foundation, because I can picture that, the sort of feeling that I have to work even harder because people are going to make this make this criticism. And I think anytime there's those sort of optics around something, people who are at the center of them do feel like they have to work much harder to prove themselves. So that makes sense. So there have been some calls that for legislative action, to change the way foundations really value the work of family members so that it doesn't count towards the payout that a foundation does. But all the other employees' work would count towards that payout. When you hear something like that, what's your response? Do you think that's necessary?
I think that's creating a difference of class or a difference of people, which is not what our country is founded on. And the equality that goes into this is that I work as hard as anyone else here. Maybe oftentimes, I can be on call at any hour of the day. And so I think that piece is really important, is that when you're putting in the time, you should be paid for your work. It doesn't matter what your last name is, whose family you were born into. It's based on merit and work ethic. And that just really, I'm not sure that I don't understand the reasoning behind it and what value that would give to a foundation. I would be happy to talk about what percentage of our grant making on an annual basis should go into administrative costs or the operation costs of the foundation. But to pull a piece of it out doesn't make any sense to me.
Or to me either. I mean, so we agree. We agree there. It doesn't make any sense. And your point about class, creating a class does make sense. And also, we've fought over so many decades and centuries for pay to reflect value contributed. So it is an interesting narrative. So I want to turn to another sort of criticism of philanthropy that's very popular right now, which is around diversity, equity, inclusion. And, on their face, if you look up diversity, equity, and inclusion in the dictionary, these actually sound to be pretty valuable things. We want to have a diverse set of perspectives that inform decisions. We want people to feel like they are part of the process. So, on the dictionary definition basis or just plain, common sense basis, it makes sense. But there's something different happening in philanthropy where these are being turned into capital D, capital E, capital I, DEI mandates that there be, certain demographic representation, that, there's an obligation for foundations to invest in leaders of certain colors, genders, race, et cetera. And there's been a lot of criticism of philanthropy as not supporting the right kinds of people. You do a lot of work to support your community. When you hear this criticism and this sort of DEI mandate approach to philanthropy, how do you react?
Debbie, what you said is spot on. I agree that diversity and equity and inclusion are all so important. But for it to be mandated, to me, I would say it shocks me. It's a jaw dropper. The foundation supports nonprofits because of their mission, not because of the people that they're serving, whether it's the color of their skin, where they came from, what their socioeconomic status is, what their political beliefs are. We are supporting organizations because of their mission. And we want to make sure that the mission is being fulfilled and they're able to prove that through outcomes of the end result of the work that they're doing. It doesn't matter who they're serving. Is it men? Is it women? Or is it both? It's that they're serving a mission that's helping people really become contributing members of our society. And so for those mandates to happen, I'm afraid it would change nonprofits' missions and visions because they would be forced to do something that doesn't necessarily align with what they're doing, rather than helping the people that need the help and the people that they're serving.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It's about what the actual goal is, which is what the mission reflects.
Right.
When you hear about funders requiring their grantees to provide demographic information, what do you think that does to the funder grantee relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just had a call that somebody said, this is what our diversity numbers look like, or these are the people that we're serving. And I said, that's wonderful, but that's not something that we look at. And I think what it does is it again creates classes. It creates who these people are, rather than why aren't we just helping people because they need the help? I think the relationship between funders and nonprofits can be strained already because so many nonprofits are so scared of funders when we're just normal people that are out there to truly help them help the people that they're working with. And I just worry that it will create a society where we're worried about defining who these people are serving rather than the mission.
Yeah, you're right. It starts to become a checklist of, did we hit the right boxes versus did we actually improve something in the community and in the world? And I'm even hearing now of grantees who receive that kind of funding that's through that lens. And for the grantee, it feels like somebody checked a box at the foundation end. It's like, I've invested in, pick your choice. I've invested in BIPOC-led organizations. I'm done.
Right.
Without the actual real deep diversity, equity, inclusion, the meaning of that, which is what you described your foundation and your family as being the drivers for their philanthropy, is really to be part of the community and to help lift it, right? So it's almost like that whole thinking that you described at the beginning, the whole philosophy of philanthropy gets lost completely. So I'm so glad that you're approaching it the way you are from the mission perspective. And yes, funders are people.
Just humans.
They're humans. Carrie, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, a nonprofit should be able to do the work that they want to do. I don't need to dictate how they do their work. And that's what our foundation takes great pride on. Let them be who they are.
And that's why you're funding them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Well, Carrie, it's a real pleasure to have you here today and for you to share your view on philanthropy and your family's story. And also just reminding people that funders are people too. I think that's a really important message and it gets lost in all the debate. So I really appreciate you coming today and sharing that.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you for taking this time to share these messages with all of us listeners, including me, who get to listen to the other podcasts. I really appreciate the work that Roundtable is doing.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Sounds great. Thank you.